I never thought my own child could erase me while I was still breathing. But that's exactly what Richard tried to do the moment I was too weak to fight back. It started with a headache, not just any headache, but the kind that makes your vision blur around the edges. I was washing dishes when it hit me a sudden pain that shot from the base of my skull up to my temples. The glass I was holding slipped from my fingers, shattering across the kitchen floor. I remember trying to reach for the counter to steady myself, but my right arm wouldn't cooperate. Then everything went dark. I woke up 3 days later in the hospital, tubes running into my arms, and a machine beeping steadily beside me. A stroke, the doctor explained. A rather severe one. I was lucky to be alive, though my right side was significantly weakened, and my speech was slurred. Recovery would take time, possibly months. Richard visited that first week with Melissa, his wife of 5 years. They brought flowers, lilies, which I've always disliked because of their overpowering smell. Thank you for being here. If this story touched you, please subscribe and don't forget to leave a comment. I read every one of them, and it's how I see just how far our stories are reaching. But I didn't say anything. I was too tired to focus on trying to make my mouth form words correctly. Don't worry about anything, Mom, Richard said, patting my hand. We're taking care of everything at home. I nodded, grateful. My house, the same one where I'd raised Richard after his father died. The one I paid off by working 2 jobs for 15 years, needed looking after. Bills needed paying. Plants needed watering. The visits became less frequent as the weeks passed. Richard came alone most times, always in a rush, always checking his watch. One day, he brought a stack of papers, just some things that need your signature, Mom, he said, sliding a pen into my weak hand. Insurance forms, mostly. And this one's for temporary power of attorney, so I can handle your finances while you're recovering. I hesitated. Something in his expression didn't seem right. I can read them myself, I said, my speech still slightly slurred but improving. His smile tightened. The doctor said not to strain your eyes. Remember, it's all standard stuff. I'm just trying to help. I signed some, but kept the power of attorney form aside. I'll look at this one later, I said. He left without the usual kiss on my forehead. The next day, a different doctor came to see me, a neurologist who seemed surprised by my progress. Your scans are looking remarkably good, Mrs. Pearson, he said, flipping through my chart. Your son mentioned you were having memory issues and confusion, but I'm not seeing evidence of that in our cognitive tests. Memory issues, confusion, I hadn't experienced either. That night, I overheard a nurse talking to her colleague outside my door. The son keeps asking when she'll be discharged to a care facility. She was saying, seems awfully eager, considering. She's improving. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. I began paying closer attention to Richard's questions during his increasingly brief visits. How long until I could be moved? Had I considered selling the house? It was too big for me now, wasn't it? And those stairs would be dangerous after. A stroke. Then came the day when Melissa visited alone. She sat awkwardly in the chair beside my bed, her hands resting on her slightly swollen belly. I hadn't known she was pregnant. We wanted to surprise you when the time was right, she explained. Not meeting my eyes with everything going on, we just didn't want to overwhelm you. How far along are you? I asked. Almost 5 months. 5 months. They kept it from me for 5 months. The house has 4 bedrooms, I said. Your apartment only has 1. You should have told me. I could have helped you prepare. She looked uncomfortable. Richard's handling everything, don't worry. When my physical therapist mentioned I might be ready for discharge in another week, I didn't tell Richard immediately. Instead, I called my old friend Catherine, who'd been bringing me books and real coffee throughout my hospital stay. Can you pick me up next Friday? I asked her. And maybe let me stay with you a few days until I'm steadier on my feet. Of course, Eleanor, she said without hesitation. But won't Richard want to take you home? I'm not sure my home is still mine, I replied. The day of my discharge, Richard finally appeared, looking flustered when he saw me dressed and sitting in a wheelchair with my small bag packed. Mom, what's going on? I thought we agreed you'd go to Sunny Pines for rehabilitation. We never agreed to that, I said calmly. The doctor cleared me to go home with outpatient therapy. His face paled. But the house isn't, I mean, we haven't prepared. Catherine's picking me up, I interrupted. I'll stay with her for a few days. That's ridiculous, he snapped. You're coming home. I'm your son. I studied his face, the face I'd memorized. As a tiny, wrinkled newborn, the face I watched mature 3 years of school photos. Now it was the face of a stranger trying to manage me out of existence. Yes, I said quietly. You are my son. And I'd like to see what you've done to my house. The drive home was tense. Catherine followed in her car despite Richard's protests. As we pulled into the driveway of my brick colonial, the home I cherished for 30 years, I noticed small changes immediately. The rose bushes I tended so carefully had been removed. The porch swing was gone. New curtains hung in the front windows. Inside, the changes were more dramatic. My antique side table was replaced with a modern console. The walls, once a warm beige, were now stark white. Family photos had been rearranged, with several missing, particularly those featuring just me or me with Richard's father. We've been updating a few things, Richard explained, watching me nervously. Melissa thought the place could use refreshing. I said nothing as I moved through the first floor, leaning on my cane. The kitchen had new appliances, nice ones, more expensive than I would have chosen. My collection of cookbooks was gone from the shelf. Where are my books? I asked. We packed some things away, he said vaguely. The house was cluttered. I nodded and moved toward the stairs. Mom, you shouldn't. I ignored him and began the slow climb to the second floor, gripping the banister firmly. Richard hovered behind me, while Catherine waited respectfully at the bottom. The upstairs hallway was lined with boxes labeled mom stuff. My heart pounded as I approached my bedroom, the master suite at the end of the hall with the bay window overlooking the garden. I pushed open the door and froze. My bedroom wasn't my bedroom anymore. The space had been transformed into a nursery with pale yellow walls, a white crib, a changing table, and a rocking chair. A border of dancing elephants ran around the perimeter. The closet stood open, filled with tiny clothes and stuffed animals. There wasn't a single trace of me, not my bed, not my dresser, not the reading chair where I'd spent countless evenings. We needed the space, Richard said behind me, his voice oddly defensive. You've been gone almost 3 months, the baby's coming in for weeks. I turned to look at him, this child I'd raised alone. This man who had erased me from my own home. Where are my things? My voice was deadly quiet. We put the important stuff in the basement. Some of it's in storage. The rest, well, a lot of it was old, Mom. We donated what you wouldn't need. What I wouldn't need, I repeated, because you thought I wouldn't be coming back. Richard had the decency to look ashamed. But only briefly. The doctor said the prognosis was uncertain. They told us to prepare for long-term care. We had to make decisions without consulting me. Without my consent, you were in no condition to make decisions, he said, his tone hardening. We did what was best for everyone. For everyone. Or, for you? Catherine appeared at the top of the stairs. Eleanor, do you want to leave? She asked softly. I shook my head. No, this is my house. I paid for it. I own it. I looked back at Richard. Where am I supposed to sleep tonight? He shifted uncomfortably. We set up the guest room for you. It's smaller, but everything's on one level, which is safer. The guest room, the smallest bedroom in the house, used mainly for storage in recent years. I walked to it without another word. It had been hastily cleaned, with a twin bed, a small dresser, an ATV mounted on the wall. None of my personal touches. None of my photographs or books or the quilt my mother had made. I thought you wouldn't come back, Richard finally said. From the hospital, the doctor said. Well, it doesn't matter what they said. You're here now. We'll figure it out. I sat down on the unfamiliar bed. I'd like to rest now, I said. Alone, Richard hesitated, then nodded and left. I heard him speaking to Catherine in low tones downstairs, probably trying to convince her I was better off with him. When the house was quiet, I called Catherine on my cell phone. Can you come back tomorrow morning, girlie? There's something I need to do, of course. She promised. 6 a.m. to early. Perfect, I said. That night, I slept on the sofa in the living room, not because the guest room bed was uncomfortable, but because I refused to be relegated to a space that had been chosen for me in my own home. Richard and Melissa stayed upstairs, whispering arguments I couldn't quite hear. At 5 a.m., I was already awake. I moved quietly through the house, taking pictures with my phone, documentation of all the changes made without my permission. In the kitchen, I found the drawer where I kept important papers. Most were still there, including the deed to the house, solely in my name. Catherine arrived precisely at 6, as promised. I was waiting by the door with my purse and a small overnight bag. Where are we going? She asked as she helped me to her car. To see my lawyer. To see my lawyer, I said, and then to a real estate agent. Walter Green's office hadn't changed in 20 years. Same oak desk, same burgundy leather chairs, same diplomas hanging on the wall. At 72, he was semi-retired, but he'd been my lawyer since Robert died, and I trusted him completely. Eleanor, he said, rising when Catherine helped me into his office, I heard about your stroke. You're looking remarkably well. Thank you, Walter. I'm feeling stronger every day. I lowered myself carefully into the chair across from his desk, strong enough to realize my son has been planning my obsolescence. I told him everything, the questions about selling the house, the forms Richard had tried to get me to sign, the complete transformation of my home, the nursery where my bedroom should be. Walter listened without interrupting, his expression darkening with each detail. Do you have the deed? He asked when I finished. I pulled it from my purse and handed it to him. He studied it, nodding. Good, it's solely in your name, and you never Sign power of attorney, no. He tried, but I kept that form aside. Walter leaned back in his chair. Then legally, you're in the clear. He has no right to sell your property, dispose of your possessions, or make any changes without your consent. What about the things they've already thrown away? You could pursue a civil claim for the value of anything donated or discarded. But Eleanor, I have to ask, what do you want to do? Do you want to move back in, sue them for damages, find a new place? I hadn't fully formed my answer until that moment. I want to sell the house. Are you sure? Catherine asked from the chair beside me. It's your home. It was my home, I corrected. Now it's just a building filled with painful memories and strangers' furniture. I turned back to Walter. How quickly can we list it? You could list it today if you want. The market's strong right now. But what about your son and his wife? They're currently living there. They have no legal right to be there, I said, my voice steady. They never paid rent. There's no lease. They moved in thinking I would die or be institutionalized. They can find somewhere else to live. Walter nodded slowly. I'll draft a formal notice to vacate. 30 days is standard. After that, if they haven't left, we can pursue eviction. Give them 60 days, I said. The baby's coming in for weeks. I'm not heartless. While Walter made some calls, Catherine squeezed my hand. Are you sure about this, Eleanor? It's a big decision, I squeezed back. I've never been more sure of anything. Did you see how they erased me, my books, my photographs? Even my bedroom all gone, like I never existed. I can't live in a house where my own child tried to write me out of the story. Walter's assistant brought in some papers for me to sign. A listing agreement with a reputable agency. A formal notice to vacate. Documentation of the unauthorized changes to the property. Will need to schedule an appraisal, Walter said. And you'll want to speak with the listing agent about staging, given the situation. You might want to handle showings when your son and his wife aren't home. I'll stay with Catherine until the house sells, I said. I don't want to be there at all. By noon, everything was in motion. I had signed the papers, spoken to a listing agent named Diane, and arranged for an appraisal the following week. Walter would have a formal notice to vacate delivered to Richard that afternoon. What now? Catherine asked as we left Walter's office. Now we go to lunch, I said. I've been eating hospital food for 3 months. I want a real meal at Marlene's diner. We sat in a booth by the window at Marlene's, the same booth where Robert and I used to have Saturday breakfast every weekend. I ordered ABLT with extra tomato and savored every bite. Hospital food had indeed been as bland as I remembered. Tell me something, Catherine said as she stirred her coffee. Did you ever think Richard would do something like this? I set my sandwich down and considered the question. No. And yes, he's always been practical. Too practical sometimes. When Robert died, Richard was the one who wanted to sell the house immediately. Said it was too big for just me. I thought he was being pragmatic. But now I wonder if he's always seen me as a temporary inconvenience. That's harsh, Eleanor. So is turning your mother's bedroom into a nursery while she's still in the hospital? My phone buzzed in my purse. Richard's name flashed on the screen. I declined the call. He's probably received the notice, Catherine said. Probably. The phone buzzed again, then again. Then a text message appeared. Mom. What the hell is this? Some lawyer just served me papers saying we have 60 days to move out. Call me right now. I put the phone back in my purse without responding. You're not going to call him? Not yet, I said. Let him feel what I felt when I saw my bedroom had been erased. We finished lunch, and Catherine drove me back to her house, a lovely Cape Cod with a guest room that actually felt welcoming. I took a nap, exhausted from the day's events, and when I woke up, there were 6 missed calls from Richard and a string of increasingly angry text messages. Mom, this is ridiculous. We need to talk. You can't just sell the house. Where are we supposed to go with a newborn? This is all a misunderstanding. Call me back. If you don't call me back, I'm coming over. To Catherine's, I texted him back my first response. Do not come to Catherine's. I will call you tomorrow morning at 10, not before. That night, I slept better than I had in months, in a bed with fresh floral sheets and a quilt that Catherine had made herself. Before falling asleep, I scrolled through old photos on my phone, pictures of my house as it used to be, with my touches, my preferences, my life visible in every corner. I wondered how many of those items I would ever see again. At precisely 10 a.m. the next morning, I called Richard. He answered on the first ring. Mom, what are you doing? His voice was tight with anger. You can't just sell our house. It's not our house, Richard. It's my house, the one I paid for. The one where your father and I raised you. The one you were planning to take over when I was gone. That's not fair. We were just what? Making changes without my knowledge or consent. Disposing of my belongings. Converting my bedroom into a nursery without even asking if I was coming home? The doctor said your prognosis was uncertain. We had to plan. You had to assume I was dying or permanently incapacitated. I interrupted. That was your choice, and now I'm making mine. There was a long pause when Richard spoke again. His voice was lower, controlled. Mom, please, Melissa is 8 months pregnant. We can't find a place and move in 60 days. Be reasonable. I'm being very reasonable. I could have given you 30 days, which is standard. I gave you 60 because of the baby. You'll manage. Is this about the bedroom? We can move the nursery. You can have your old room back. It's not about the bedroom, Richard. It's about you deciding I was already gone. It's about you and Melissa taking over my home, erasing my presence, and planning your future as if I had no part in it. It's about you treating me like I was already dead. Another silence. Then, what about all our work? We painted, we renovated the kitchen. You didn't ask permission for any of that? You didn't consult me. You did what you wanted because you assumed the house would be yours soon enough. So this is punishment. No, Richard, this is consequence. You made a series of choices. And now you're facing the results of those choices. The house will be listed next week. I expect you and Melissa to accommodate the showings. I've instructed the agent to give you 24 hours notice for each one. And where are you going to live? He asked, a hint of desperation in his voice. You can't manage on your own yet. You need help. I'll be staying with Catherine until I find a suitable place of my own. A smaller house, maybe. Or a nice condo. With no stairs, something that's truly mine. Mom, please, I need to go now, Richard. I have an appointment with my physical therapist. This was true. Catherine was waiting to drive me. We can talk again in a few days, once you've had time to process this. I ended the call before he could argue further. My hand was shaking slightly, the residual weakness from the stroke, but also the emotional toll of the conversation. I hadn't raised my voice, hadn't broken down, hadn't wavered. I was proud of that. Catherine drove me to physical therapy, where I worked with a kind young man named Jamal on regaining strength in my right side. I told him about my plans to sell the house and find something more manageable. Smart move, he said as he guided me through an exercise to improve my grip strength. My grandmother did the same thing after her stroke. Found a nice one-level condo in a community with other seniors. She loves it, says it's like college but with better food and no exams. The idea was appealing. A fresh start, a place without memories of Richard's betrayal, without the ghost of what used to be. As Jamal helped me practice walking with a cane, I felt a growing sense of possibility. The stroke hadn't ended my life, it had just changed its direction. After therapy, Catherine and I stopped at a coffee shop. As we sat by the window with our drinks, I noticed a real estate office across the street. Can we go over there? I asked. I'd like to see what's available. The agent was a woman about my age named Doris. When I explained my situation, recovering from a stroke, selling my house, looking for something more suitable, she was immediately sympathetic. I have just the thing, she said, pulling up listings on her computer. A beautiful garden condo in Oakwood Commons, 1 level, 2 bedrooms, a small private patio. The community has a pool, a clubhouse, and weekly activities. It just came on the market yesterday. She showed me photos on her screen. The condo was bright and modern with large windows and hardwood floors. The master bedroom had a walk-in closet and an ensuite bathroom with grab bars already installed. The kitchen was smaller than mine but perfectly adequate for 1 person. And the patio opened onto a courtyard with carefully tended flower beds. It's lovely, I said. How much? She named a price that was well within my budget, especially after selling my house. Would you like to see it today? She asked. I can call the seller and arrange a showing. I looked at Catherine, who nodded encouragingly. Yes, I said, I'd like that very much. As we drove to see the condo, my phone buzzed with another text from Richard. Melissa is very upset. This dress isn't good for the baby. Can we please talk in person? I put the phone away without answering. The baby would be fine, Melissa would be fine, Richard would be fine. They were young, capable, and had each other. They would find a new place to live, one they chose together, one they paid for themselves. And I would find my own place, one where no one could erase me again. The Oakwood Commons condo exceeded my expectations. Flooded with natural light, it had an open floor plan that would be easy to navigate as I continued my recovery. The master bathroom had been modified for accessibility with a walk-in shower and strategically placed grab bars. The kitchen featured lower countertops on one side, perfect for preparing meals. While seated if my stamina waned, the previous owner had a stroke 5 years ago. Doris explained as she showed us around. He modified the space thoughtfully, then lived here independently until he passed away last month. His daughter is selling it as is, including all the accessibility features. I ran my hand along the smooth granite countertop. It's perfect, there's more, Doris said. Leading us to the patio, the community has services available for residents: housekeeping, meal delivery, transportation to medical appointments. All optional, all reasonable rates. The patio overlooked a small but meticulously maintained garden with a stone path winding through flowering shrubs in the distance. I could see the community clubhouse and swimming pool. "What do you think?" Catherine asked as we prepared to leave. "I think I'd like to make an offer," I said. Doris beamed. "I can draw out the paperwork right away. Assuming your house sells quickly and in this market, it should. When would you like to close?" "As soon as possible," I replied. "I'd like to be settled before Richard's baby arrives." On the drive back to Catherine's house, I felt lighter than I had in months. The condo represented more than just a new home. It was independence, a fresh start, proof that I was still capable of making my own decisions. "I need to go back to the house," I said suddenly. "There are things I need to retrieve before Richard has a chance to misplace them." Catherine glanced at me. "Are you sure that's a good idea?" Richard seemed pretty angry. "That's exactly why I need to go now, while he's at work. There are items that can't be replaced: jewelry, photographs, my mother's recipe box. I don't trust them to keep those things safe, especially now." Catherine sighed but nodded. "All right. But I'm coming with you, and we're going to be quick about it." We arrived at the house just after 3 p.m. Richard would be at the office until 6, and Melissa usually had prenatal yoga on Tuesday afternoons. The house looked different somehow, even from the outside, less like my home and more like a place I once visited. I used my key to unlock the front door, half expecting it not to work, but it turned smoothly. Inside, the house was quiet. I moved directly to the kitchen, where I retrieved my mother's handwritten recipe box from the top shelf of the pantry. It was still there, untouched, probably because it looked old and unimportant. "Let's check the basement for your things," Catherine suggested. Richard said that's where they put the important stuff. The basement stairs were steep, and I took them slowly, gripping the railing with my good hand. Catherine walked beside me, ready to catch me if I stumbled. The basement was organized into neat stacks of labeled boxes: Eleanor's clothes, Eleanor's books, Eleanor's kitchen items. At least they'd been systematic in dismantling my life. I directed Catherine to the boxes I wanted to check first: personal papers, photo albums, jewelry. The jewelry box was intact, including Robert's wedding ring and my grandmother's pearl necklace. The photo albums were all accounted for. But as I was searching through a box labeled Eleanor's personal papers, I found something unexpected: a folder containing bank statements. That didn't look familiar. "What's this?" I murmured, opening it. Inside were statements for a new checking account in Richard and Melissa's names, but using my home address. The account had been opened 3 months ago, shortly after my stroke. What caught my eye were the deposits: large sums that seemed to appear regularly. "Catherine, look at this," I said, showing her the statements. "These deposits: $5,000, $3,500, $4,000 to $100. Where is this money coming from?" Catherine examined the papers, her expression growing concerned. "That's a lot of money." "Are they making that much?" "Richard makes good money, but not this good. Melissa works part-time at the library." I continued looking through the folder, and found something that made my stomach clench: copies of emails between Richard and an insurance company. I scanned them quickly, my heart pounding. They were discussing a life insurance policy on me, a policy I had never authorized, never signed for, never even knew about. The emails referenced my condition and prognosis in clinical, detached terms. "He took out a life insurance policy on me," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "while I was in the hospital. $500,000. Catherine's face hardened. "We need to call Walter." I nodded, still processing what I discovered. As we continued searching through the boxes, I found more troubling documents: papers regarding my retirement accounts, statements from my savings accounts showing large withdrawals, and a handwritten list in Richard's writing: Mom's accounts, checking, $12. 500 monthly deposits still coming in, savings, $142. Retirement, $274. House value, approx for $150,000. Life insurance, $500. Zero. Effective. Immediately below the list was a calculation of total assets and a note: enough for baby's college fund, house down payment, and Melissa to stay home full-time. My hands were shaking as I showed the paper to Catherine. "He's been inventorying my assets, planning how to use them." "Eleanor," Catherine began, then stopped, seemingly at a loss for words. "Let's take these and go," I said, gathering the documents. "I've seen enough." As we were preparing to leave, I heard the front door open upstairs, followed by footsteps. Catherine and I froze, looking at each other in alarm. "Mom," Richard's voice called out. "Is someone here?" The door was unlocked. I hadn't expected him home so early. I took a deep breath, tucked the folder of documents into Catherine's tote bag, and called back. "It's me, Richard. I'm in the basement with Catherine." Heavy footsteps approached the basement door, and then Richard appeared at the top of the stairs. He was still wearing his work clothes dress shirt, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up. He looked tired and wary. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his tone carefully neutral. "Getting some of my things," I replied, equally measured. "Personal items I didn't want to lose." His eyes moved to the open boxes around us, then back to my face. "You could have called. I would have brought whatever you needed to Catherine's. I preferred to choose for myself," I said. Since I wasn't consulted when these items were packed away, Richard came down a few steps, hands in his pockets. "Mom, about the house we need to talk. Melissa is really upset. She's been crying all day. We can talk later," I said, starting toward the stairs with Catherine's help. "I have an appointment this afternoon." "What appointment?" Richard asked, not moving from his position on the stairs, effectively blocking our path. "With who?" "My lawyer," I said, looking him directly in the eye. "And then the bank." Something flickered across his face: concern, maybe even fear. "Why the bank?" "I need to review my accounts," I said. "Make sure everything is in order after my absence." Richard's posture stiffened. "I've been handling your finances like we discussed." "Did we discuss it?" I asked. "I don't recall giving you access to my accounts, or authorizing withdrawals, or taking out a life insurance policy." The color drained from his face. "What are you talking about?" I patted Catherine's tote bag. "I think you know exactly what I'm talking about." "Richard, now, please move aside. We're leaving." For a moment, I thought he might refuse. His jaw clenched, and his eyes darted between my face and the bag containing the evidence of his betrayal. Then, slowly, he stepped aside. As we climbed the stairs, Richard remained silent, watching us with an unreadable expression. At the top, I paused and turned to him. "The house will be listed on Friday," I said. "The agent will call to schedule a time for photographs. Please make sure the place is tidy." "Mom," he began. "And Richard," I continued, as if he hadn't spoken, "I expect a full accounting of my finances. Every withdrawal, every transfer, every penny. Walter will be in touch about that." Without waiting for his response, I walked out of the house I had loved for 30 years, leaning on Catherine's arm, carrying the proof of my son's betrayal in more ways than one. In the car, Catherine looked at me with concern. "Are you okay?" I felt hollow, as if something essential had been scooped out of me. The son I had raised, the child I had sacrificed for, had been methodically planning to profit from my illness, perhaps even from my death. "No," I said honestly, "I'm not okay, but I will be." We drove straight to Walter's office. He was with another client, but his assistant ushered us into a conference room when I explained it was urgent. 20 minutes later, Walter joined us, apologizing for the delay. "This couldn't wait," I said, emptying the contents of Catherine's tote bag onto the conference table. "I need you to see what my son has been doing." Walter examined the documents carefully, his expression growing grimmer with each page he turned. "This is very troubling, Eleanor," he said finally. "These withdrawals from your accounts, did you authorize them?" "No. I never gave Richard access to those accounts. And this life insurance policy, I knew nothing about it, never signed for it, never approved it." Walter set the papers down and looked at me directly. "Eleanor, these aren't just civil matters. These could be criminal offenses: fraud, forgery, possibly even elder financial abuse." The word elder stung. I had never thought of myself that way, but I knew Walter was right. What Richard had done wasn't just a family disagreement, it was potentially criminal. "What do we do?" I asked. "First, we contact your bank immediately to freeze your accounts and report the unauthorized withdrawals. Then we file a police report for the potential forgery and fraud." He hesitated. "Eleanor, you understand what this means. If we pursue this, Richard could face serious consequences." I closed my eyes briefly, picturing Richard as a child, his first day of school, his high school graduation, the day he married Melissa. Then I pictured my bedroom transformed into a nursery, my belongings packed away or discarded, and the cold calculation in his written inventory of my assets. "Do what needs to be done," I said firmly. "All of it." Walter nodded and picked up his phone to call the bank. While he spoke with them, Catherine squeezed my hand supportively. "You're doing the right thing," she whispered. "Am I?" I asked, suddenly uncertain. "He's still my son. A son who betrayed your trust in the worst possible way," she reminded me gently. "You're protecting yourself, Eleanor. You have that right." Walter finished his call and turned back to us. "The accounts are frozen. They've flagged all recent activity for review. I scheduled a meeting with the fraud department for tomorrow morning." He started making notes on a legal pad. "As for the life insurance policy, we'll need to contact the company immediately to report the fraudulent application." As Walter outlined the next steps, I felt a strange mix of emotions: grief for the relationship I had lost, anger at the betrayal, but also a growing sense of resolve. Richard had assumed I was done, finished, no longer capable of standing up for myself. He had calculated the value of my life in dollars and planned accordingly. But I wasn't done. Not by a long shot. My phone buzzed with a text message. Richard. Mom, please come back so we can talk about this. There's an explanation for everything. I showed the message to Catherine and Walter, then turned off my phone without responding. There always is, I said quietly. There's always an explanation. But some things can't be explained away. Walter gathered the documents into a folder. I'll start the formal paperwork today. In the meantime, Eleanor, try to get some rest. Tomorrow will be a difficult day. As Catherine drove me back to her house, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across the road. I watched the familiar neighborhoods pass by, places I had known for decades, now seen through new eyes. What are you thinking? Catherine asked after we had driven in silence for several minutes. I'm thinking about the condo, I said, about starting fresh, about living the rest of my life on my own terms. That sounds like a good plan. Yes, I agreed, it does. And Catherine, thank you for being here, for helping me see the truth. Even when it hurts, she reached over and squeezed my hand. That's what friends do, we help each other see clearly. As we pulled into her driveway, I made a silent promise to myself. No more allowing others to determine my worth. No more accepting betrayal in the name of family. No more disappearing to make room for someone else's story. This was my life, and I was reclaiming it one painful discovery at a time. The next morning, Walter drove Catherine and me to the bank. He had arranged a meeting with the fraud investigation team, bringing along the documents we'd found in Richard's basement. The senior investigator, a woman named Marcia with steel gray hair and reading glasses on a chain, reviewed everything with methodical precision. These signatures are clearly forgeries, she said, comparing them to my genuine signature on bank forms, not even particularly good ones. And these withdrawals, she tapped the statements with a manicured finger, were all made while you were hospitalized. Yes, I confirmed. I was in no condition to visit a bank or authorize transfers. Marcia nodded, her expression grim. Mrs. Pearson, I've been handling fraud cases for 22 years. What I'm seeing here is textbook elder financial abuse. Your son took advantage of your medical crisis to systematically drain your accounts. The phrase elder financial abuse stung. I had never considered myself elderly, despite my 68 years. But the term was accurate and the reality of what Richard had done hit me anew. How much can be recovered? Walter asked. We've already frozen the accounts, Marcia replied. We can reverse any transfers made within the last 90 days, though it may take some time. For withdrawals made in cash, recovery is more complicated. She turned to me. Mrs. Pearson, I need to ask, do you want to press charges? The question hung in the air. Criminal charges against my own son, the baby's father, my only child. What would happen to him? I asked quietly. Walter cleared his throat. Financial fraud of this magnitude, we're talking about potential felony charges, possibly jail time. And if I don't press charges, we can still pursue civil remedies, Walter said. Sue for the return of funds, damages for the unauthorized use of your home, emotional distress. But without criminal charges, he faces fewer consequences. I thought about Richard's calculating behavior, not just the money, but the entire attempt to erase me from my own life to profit from my illness. The cold, methodical way he had inventoried my assets while I lay in a hospital bed, fighting to recover. I need some time to think about it, I said finally. Let's focus on recovering what we can first. Marcia nodded understandingly. We'll proceed with the fraud investigation and account recovery. You can decide about pressing charges later. As we left the bank, my phone buzzed with another text from Richard. Mom, I've been calling all morning. We need to talk. Please call me back. I showed it to Walter. Double quotes. Do you want to speak with him? He asked. Not yet, I said. Not until I understand exactly what he's done and what I'm going to do about it, Walter nodded. That's wise. In the meantime, I suggest we move forward with the house sale and your condo purchase. The sooner you're financially independent and settled in your new home, the better. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. Walter expedited the paperwork for my condo purchase, arranging for a bridge loan to cover the down payment until my house sold. The real estate agent photographed my house while Richard and Melissa were at work, and the listing went live on Friday morning. By Friday afternoon, there were already 3 showing requests. The market was indeed strong, as Walter had predicted. I instructed the agent to schedule all showings without consulting Richard or Melissa. They would simply receive notification 24 hours in advance, as legally required. Meanwhile, the bank's investigation confirmed what we already knew. Richard had forged my signature on multiple documents, including the life insurance policy, which the insurance company had now voided. Over the past 3 months, he had transferred nearly $63,000 from my accounts to his, more than I had initially calculated. The bank was able to reverse $41,000 in recent transfers, but the rest had been withdrawn in cash and was untraceable through it all. Richard continued to call and text. His messages growing increasingly desperate. I maintained my silence, focusing instead on my physical therapy, my condo preparations, and rebuilding my financial security. Then, on Sunday morning, the doorbell rang at Catherine's house. I was alone. Catherine had gone to church, as she did every week. Peering through the peephole, I saw Richard standing on the porch, hands in his pockets, looking anxious. I considered not answering, but something in me needed to face him, too. Look him in the eye, and hear whatever justification he had concocted. I opened the door but remained in the doorway, blocking entry. "Mom," he said, sounding relieved. "Finally, I've been trying to reach you for days." "I know," I replied, my voice steady. I wasn't ready to talk. "Can I come in, please?" I hesitated, then stepped aside. He entered Catherine's living room, looking around awkwardly before sitting on the edge of the sofa. I took the armchair opposite him, keeping the coffee table between us. "You look better," he said. "Stronger." "I am stronger," I agreed, "in more ways than one." He nodded, fidgeting with his wedding ring. "Mom, about the accounts. It's not what you think. It's not what you think. I was just trying to help manage things while you were sick, by forging my signature, by transferring my money to your account, by taking out a life insurance policy on me without my knowledge." His face flushed. "The doctor said your prognosis was uncertain. They told me to prepare for the worst. I was trying to get our affairs in order." "Our affairs?" I repeated. "You mean my affairs, my money, my house. I'm your only child," he said, a hint of defensiveness creeping into his voice. "Everything would have come to me eventually anyway." The bluntness of his entitlement stunned me. "Eventually," I said slowly. "But I'm not dead yet, Richard. I didn't die. I recovered, and even if I hadn't, what gives you the right to start claiming my assets before I'm gone? That's not fair." He protested. "We needed to make preparations for the baby. The apartment was too small, and you had this big house just sitting empty while you were in the hospital. It made sense for us to move in, without asking me, without even telling me. You were in no condition to make decisions, so you made them for me," I said. "You decided I wouldn't recover. You decided my bedroom would become a nursery. You decided my belongings could be packed away or discarded. You decided my money was yours to take." Richard ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my heart ache. "Despite everything, the bank froze our accounts," he said. "They're saying I committed fraud. Do you know what that could do to my career? To our lives? You did commit fraud, Richard. You forged my signature. You took my money without permission. I was going to pay it back once everything was settled with the house. And once I was dead," I interrupted, "or in a nursing home, with no legal capacity." He looked away, unable to meet my eyes. "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like? Explain it to me. Help me understand how my son could do this." Richard was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was low. "When you had the stroke, I was scared. The doctors were talking about brain damage, about long-term care facilities. They showed me the scans, all these dark areas where blood wasn't flowing. They said even if you survived, you might not be you anymore." I remembered those early days. The struggle to form words, to move my right side, to make sense of what had happened. I had been frightened too, and then Melissa told me she was pregnant. He continued. "We've been trying for 2 years and suddenly it was happening. Right when I thought I was losing you, it felt like the universe was making room for one life by taking another. So you decided to help the universe along," I said, my voice cold. "By erasing me before I was gone." "That's not," he began, then stopped. "I was trying to be practical, to take care of things, to make sure Melissa and the baby would be okay by stealing from me." He flinched at the word. "I didn't think of it as stealing. You're my mother. I'm your heir. I was just advancing things without my consent." "Yes," he admitted finally, "without your consent, and I'm sorry for that. But Mom, please, you have to drop this fraud investigation. If this goes further, if there are criminal charges, my career is over. Our lives will be ruined. Just when the baby is coming." I studied him, this man I had raised, looking for the son I had loved unconditionally. In his place sat a stranger who viewed me as an inconvenience, my life as currency, my death as a solution. "I haven't decided yet what I'm going to do about the criminal charges," I said honestly. "But the house sale is proceeding. The bank is reversing the transfers they can trace, and I'm moving into my new condo as soon as possible." "Mom, please, you and Melissa have 53 days left to find a new place," I continued. "I've been more than generous with the timeline." "What about the baby?" he asked. "A last attempt at leverage. Your grandchild, don't you want to be part of their life?" The question struck a nerve. I did want to know my grandchild, to hold them, to watch them grow, but not at the cost of my dignity, my autonomy, my self-respect. "That will depend entirely on you and Melissa. I said. On whether you can accept that I am still alive, still capable, and still in charge of my own life. Richard stared at me, something shifting in his expression, a slow realization that the power balance had changed. Irreversibly. Is there anything I can do? He asked finally. Anything that would make this right? I considered the question seriously. Was there a way back from this betrayal? A path to reconciliation? Return the money you took in cash, I said. All of it, no excuses, no installment plans. Then find your own place to live, not my house, not with my money. Start fresh on your own terms, with your own resources, and most importantly, acknowledge what you did, not just to me, but to yourself. Admit that you tried to erase me because it was convenient for you, because you thought I was finished. He looked down at his hands. And if I do all that, then maybe we can talk about what comes next, about the baby, about being family again, but on different terms that don't include expecting me to disappear for your convenience. Richard nodded slowly, his shoulders slumped. He looked defeated, diminished. Part of me wanted to comfort him, to say it would all be okay, as I had so many times throughout his childhood. But that part was overruled by a stronger voice, the voice that demanded justice, respect, recognition. I should go, he said, standing. Melissa's waiting in the car. I walked him to the door. As he stepped onto the porch, he turned back, his expression uncertain. For what it's worth, Mom, I am sorry, not just for getting caught, but for everything. I looked at him, this child of mine who had grown into a man I barely recognized. I believe that you're sorry now, I said. The question is what you'll do with that sorrow. I closed the door gently but firmly, then leaned against it, feeling the weight of the confrontation in every muscle. My right side ached from the tension, a reminder of how far I had come in my recovery, and how far I still had to go. Catherine found me still sitting in the armchair. When she returned from church, Richard was here. I told her. We talked. How did it go? She asked, concern evident in her voice. It went, truthfully, I replied, for perhaps the first time in a long while. That night, I lay awake thinking about choices, Richard's choices, my choices. The choice is still to come. The house would sell soon. The condo would become my new home. My finances would stabilize with most of the stolen money recovered. But what about the relationship with my son, with my future grandchild? Could those be recovered too? Or were some things, once broken, impossible to mend? I didn't have answers yet. But for the first time since finding my bedroom transformed into a nursery, I felt fully present in my own story. Not as a footnote in someone else's life, not as an inconvenience to be managed away, but as the author of my own future. Whatever came next would be my choice, and that, at least, was something no one could take from me again. The house sold. In 6 days, 3 offers came in above asking price, and by Friday afternoon, I had accepted the highest, a young couple with 2 small children who loved the backyard and the school district. They requested a 45-day closing, which aligned perfectly with my condo purchase timeline. When Walter called with the news, I felt a curious mix of emotions: relief that everything was proceeding smoothly, sadness at letting go of the home where I'd spent 30 years, and a quiet satisfaction that I was taking control of my life again. The buyers want to do a final walkthrough next week, Walter said. They're particularly interested in some of the built-ins and fixtures. Would you be comfortable being there? Yes, I replied without hesitation. It's still my house. I should be the one to show it. The bank's fraud investigation was also moving forward. They had recovered most of the electronically transferred funds, though the cash withdrawals, nearly $22,000, remained unaccounted for. Richard had not contacted me since our confrontation at Catherine's house, but Marcia from the bank fraud department informed me that he had been in to speak with them. He admitted to the transfers, she told me during our weekly update call, said he acted without proper authorization but insisted he was going to pay it back. He's offering to sign a repayment agreement for the cash withdrawals. What did you tell him? I asked. That it's not my decision, she replied. It's yours. You're the one who has to decide whether to accept a repayment plan or pursue criminal charges. I still hadn't made that decision. Part of me wanted Richard to face the full consequences of his actions, to understand that what he did was not just a family disagreement but a crime with real penalties. Another part, the mother who had nursed him through chicken pox and taught him to ride a bike, hesitated at the thought of seeing him in legal trouble, especially with a baby on the way. Catherine had her own opinion on the matter. He needs to learn, she said one evening as we sat on her porch swing, watching the sunset. If you let him off easy, what message does that send? That he can take advantage of you and just pay it back when he gets caught? I know, I sighed. But criminal charges could follow him for life, affect his career, his ability to provide for the baby. He should have thought of that before he started forging your signature. Catherine pointed out. Besides, you don't owe him protection from consequences. He certainly wasn't thinking about protecting you when he was helping himself to your money and giving away your things. She was right. Of course. But the decision wasn't as simple as right and wrong, justice and mercy. It was tangled up in decades of history, in the complicated love between parent and child, in my own conflicted desires for both reconciliation and accountability. The day of the house walkthrough arrived clear and warm. Catherine drove me to my old neighborhood, parking in the driveway, where I had parked my own car thousands of times before. The real estate agent, Diane, was already there, along with the young couple, the Harrises, who were buying the house. Mrs. Pearson, so nice to finally meet you, Mrs. Harris said, shaking my hand. Your home is beautiful. We're so excited about it. Thank you, I replied. I hope you'll be as happy here as I was. I meant it. Despite everything that had happened, the house itself held good memories. Robert and I bringing baby Richard home, birthday parties in the backyard, quiet evenings by the fireplace. It wasn't the house's fault that my son had tried to claim it before I was gone. As we entered, I noticed immediately that things had changed again. The modern furniture Richard and Melissa had brought in was gone, replaced by my original pieces: my sofa, my dining table, my reading chair by the window. The walls had been repainted in their original warm beige. It was as if they were trying to erase their changes, to restore the house to how I remembered it. Your son did a lovely job getting everything ready for the showing, Diane whispered as we moved from room to room. He said he wanted it to look the way you had it. I nodded, unsure how to feel about this gesture. Was it genuine remorse, a strategic attempt to get back in my good graces, or just a ploy to make the house more appealing to buyers? When we reached the second floor, I steeled myself for what I might find in the master bedroom. The door was closed. I hesitated before turning the knob, then pushed it open. The nursery was gone. The yellow walls had been repainted in the soft blue I had chosen years ago. My bed was back, made up with my favorite quilt. My dresser stood against the wall, and my reading chair was positioned by the window, just as it had always been. On the nightstand was a framed photograph of Robert and me on our 20th anniversary. Mrs. Harris stepped past me into the room. "Oh, this is lovely," she said. "Such a peaceful space." I nodded, unable to speak past the sudden tightness in my throat. Someone, Richard, presumably had gone to considerable effort to restore my bedroom exactly as it had been. It was a message of sorts, though I wasn't entirely sure what it meant. The walkthrough continued, with the Harrises asking questions about the water heater, the roof, the property boundaries. I answered automatically, my mind still processing the restored bedroom. When we finished in the backyard, Mrs. Harris turned to me with a warm smile. "Mrs. Pearson, would it be too much to ask? Would you mind sharing some of your favorite memories of living here? We'd love to know what made this house special to you." The question caught me off guard, but I found myself smiling. Well, the kitchen was always my favorite room. My husband and I would have coffee there every morning, watching the birds of the feeder outside the window, and the oak tree in the backyard we planted that when my son was born. It was just a sapling then. I continued sharing small memories: holiday gatherings, summer barbecues, quiet winter evenings. As I spoke, I realized I was giving them not just stories but a blessing of sorts, permission to create their own memories in spaces that had once been mine. When the Harrises left, Diane stayed behind to discuss some final paperwork. As she was preparing to leave, she hesitated, then said, "Your son asked me to give you this." She handed me an envelope with my name written on it in Richard's handwriting. I thanked her, tucking it into my purse without opening it. Whatever Richard had to say, I wanted to read it in private back at Catherine's house. I sat alone in the guest room and opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "Mom, I don't expect this to fix anything, but I wanted you to know that I've returned the house to the way you had it. Everything is back where it belongs. Your clothes are in your closet, your books on your shelves. I found most of the things we had packed away or put in storage. I've also enclosed a check for $22,000, the full amount of cash withdrawals from your accounts. It took everything in our savings, plus a loan from my 401k. But it's all there. What I did was wrong. Not just legally wrong, but morally wrong. I convinced myself I was being practical, looking ahead, preparing for inevitable change. But the truth is, I was being selfish and impatient. I saw an opportunity in your illness, a chance to move forward with our plans without having to wait, without having to consider your needs or wishes. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even know if I deserve it. But I do want you to know that I understand now what I did, and I'm truly sorry for all of it." Richard Denkless with the letter was a cashier's check for exactly $22. I sat holding the letter for a long time, turning it over in my hands, reading and rereading the words. It was, perhaps, the most honest communication I'd had from my son in years. There were no excuses, No justifications, just a straightforward acknowledgement of the wrong he had done. Was it enough? I wasn't sure. The money would help, of course it was rightfully mine and its return simplified the legal questions. But money wasn't the core issue. Never had been. The real wound was deeper, the casual assumption that I was disposable, that my life could be tittied away to make room for someone else's convenience. That evening, I called Walter to tell him about the check and the letter. This changes things from a legal perspective, he said. If he's returned the funds voluntarily and acknowledged wrongdoing, it strengthens the case for a civil resolution rather than criminal charges. What would that look like? I asked. A formal agreement. He admits to the unauthorized transfers, agrees to never do it again, maybe pay some additional damages for emotional distress. The bank would likely be satisfied with that outcome, and you wouldn't have to pursue criminal charges against your son. Let me think about it, I said. The next day, I had my final appointment with Jamal, my physical therapist. Over the past weeks, he had helped me regain most of the strength and coordination in my right side. My speech was clear again, and I could walk without a cane for short distances. You've made remarkable progress, Mrs. Pearson, he said as we finished our session. One of my most determined patients. Thank you, Jamal, for everything. I hesitated, then asked, can I get your opinion on something, a personal matter? He nodded, sitting down across from me. Of course, I told him about Richard, about the betrayal and the recent letter. I don't know if I can forgive him, I admitted. Or if I should. Jamal considered this thoughtfully. I see a lot of families dealing with medical crises. Some rise to the occasion, become the best versions of themselves, others don't. They crack under pressure, make bad decisions, act out of fear or selfishness, which was Richard. It sounds like both, in different ways. Jamal said. He failed you badly during your illness, but now he seems to be trying to make amends in his own way. Is that enough, though? Jamal leaned forward, his expression serious. Mrs. Pearson, in my work, I've learned that recovery isn't about getting back to exactly how things were before. Some injuries leave permanent changes. The question isn't whether you can erase what happened, but whether you can build something new that still works, that still allows for a meaningful life. I thought about his words as Catherine drove me back to her house. Recovery wasn't about erasing the injury, it was about adapting to a new reality. My relationship with Richard had been permanently altered, the trust had been broken, the dynamics shifted. But did that mean the relationship was over? Or could we build something new? Something different but still meaningful? Back at Catherine's, I found another envelope had been delivered, this one from Melissa. Inside was a sonogram image with a note. It's a girl, due September 15th. I hope it'll be part of her life. I traced the fuzzy outline of my granddaughter with my finger, a little girl, Richard's daughter, my granddaughter. An innocent who had no part in any of this. Who deserved a grandmother who loved her. That night, I made two decisions. First, I would accept Richard's repayment and pursue a civil resolution rather than criminal charges. The money had been returned, the admission of wrongdoing made. Further legal punishment seemed unnecessary, even vindictive. Second, I would call Richard not to forgive everything, not to pretend nothing had happened, but to begin the process of defining what a relationship might look like going forward. For my sake, for his, and for the little girl who would enter the world in just a few weeks. As I prepared for bed, I found myself thinking about the house not with regret, but with a sense of completion. That chapter was closing. The new owners would make it their home, fill it with their memories, and I would move forward into a space that was truly mine, designed for the person I was now, not the person I had been, or the person others expected me to be. The transition was well underway, not just from one home to another, but from one version of myself to another, stronger, clearer, more determined than ever to live the rest of my life on my own terms. I fell asleep thinking of blue walls turning yellow, then blue again, of bedrooms transformed into nurseries, then back to bedrooms, of how spaces could change their purpose, their meaning, their occupancy, and still remain, fundamentally, themselves. Moving day arrived on a Wednesday in early September, exactly 5 months after my stroke. The condo was ready, freshly painted in colors I had chosen, with new curtains and a few pieces of furniture I'd purchased to complement what I was bringing from the house. The Harrises had agreed to let me remove personal items before the closing, so Catherine and I had spent the previous weekend packing the things that mattered most. The movers arrived at 8, efficient men who treated my belongings with unexpected care. I supervised from a chair in the corner of each room, pointing out which items to take and which to leave for the Harrises. By noon, the truck was loaded and headed to Oakwood Commons. Before leaving, I walked through the house one last time. Each room held memories: Robert and I dancing in the living room on our 25th anniversary, Richard learning to play chess at the dining room table, countless holiday meals, Quiet Sunday mornings, ordinary days that had accumulated into a life. I touched door frames, window sills, the banister I had gripped during my slow climb up the stairs that day in June. In the master bedroom, I found something I hadn't noticed during the walkthrough, a small envelope taped to the inside of the closet door. My name was written on it in Richard's handwriting. Inside was a key I recognized, the spare key to my old car, which I kept in a drawer by my bed. It was such a small thing, easily overlooked in the shuffle of moving and packing, but Richard had found it, saved it, returned it to where it belonged. A tiny act of restoration that somehow meant more than the grand gesture of repainting the bedroom or returning the furniture. I slipped the key into my pocket and continued my farewell tour. In the kitchen, I ran my hand along the countertop, where I'd stood countless mornings making coffee. In the backyard, I touched the oak tree, now tall and strong, that we had planted when Richard was born. "Ready?" Catherine asked gently from the back door. I nodded. "Yes, it's time." At the condo, I directed the placement of furniture, the hanging of pictures, the arrangement of books on shelves. By late afternoon, the space had transformed from an empty shell to a home, my home, filled with my things, arranged according to my preferences. The movers left and Catherine and I collapsed onto the sofa, exhausted but satisfied. "What do you think?" she asked, gesturing around the living room. I looked at the space, smaller than my old house but perfectly adequate, with large windows overlooking the garden, comfortable furniture positioned for conversation, bookshelves filled with volumes I loved. "I think it's exactly right," I said. "It fits who I am now." "Your new beginning," Catherine said, raising her coffee mug in a toast. "My reclamation," I corrected, "of my life, my choices, my future." That evening, after Catherine left, I sat on my new patio watching the sunset. The garden was peaceful, with a small fountain providing a gentle background of flowing water. In the distance, I could see other residents walking the community paths, some alone, some in pairs. My phone buzzed with a text from Richard. "How's the new place? Did everything arrive okay?" It was the first direct communication we'd had since his letter. I had called him afterward, but our conversation had been brief and awkward, focused mainly on practical matters: the house closing, the repayment of funds, the civil agreement Walter had drafted. I typed back, "Everything's fine, the movers were excellent. Thank you for asking." A moment later, "Would it be okay if I came by sometime to see where you're living?" I hesitated, then replied, "Yes, that would be fine. Not today, though. I'm still settling in. Of course, whenever you're ready, no rush." I set the phone down, feeling a mixture of emotions. Part of me wanted to maintain the distance, to keep Richard at arm's length as punishment for what he'd done. Another part recognized that some form of relationship would have to be negotiated, especially with a granddaughter on the way. The civil agreement had been finalized the previous week. Richard had signed it without protest, accepting full responsibility for the unauthorized transfers and forged signatures, agreeing to repay the funds which he had already done, and to cover my legal expenses. The bank had closed their fraud investigation, satisfied with the resolution. There would be no criminal charges, no permanent legal record of what had happened. Was it justice? I wasn't sure, but it was a resolution I could live with, one that allowed for the possibility of moving forward without the weight of ongoing legal proceedings. The next morning, I woke in my new bedroom, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar ceiling, the different quality of light through the windows. Then I remembered this was home now, my sanctuary, my choice. I spent the day arranging my kitchen, organizing my closet, placing small decorative items on shelves and tables. The work was physically taxing, but satisfying. Each decision where to place a vase, how to arrange the spice rack was a tiny act of self-determination, a statement that this space was mine to shape as I wished. In the afternoon, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, and for a moment, I worried it might be Richard ignoring my request for time. But when I opened the door, I found a young woman holding a potted plant, one of my new neighbors. "Hi, I'm Sarah from Unit 14, she said with a warm smile. "The welcome committee sent me to say hello and bring you this housewarming gift. It's a peace lily. They're supposed to be good for purifying the air." "That's very kind," I said, taking the plant. "I'm Eleanor. I just moved in yesterday. We're glad to have you. There's a community coffee every Sunday morning in the clubhouse. If you'd like to meet more neighbors, very casual. Just drop in any time between 9 and 11. I thanked her and promised to attend. After she left, I placed a peace lily on a table by the window, touched by the simple gesture of welcome. It had been years since I lived somewhere with a sense of community, where neighbors introduced themselves and extended invitations. Over the next week, I settled into a new routine. Mornings began with coffee on the patio, watching the hummingbirds visit the feeder I'd hung. I would walk the community paths, increasing my distance each day as my strength improved. Afternoons were for reading, ranging my new space, or meeting with Catherine for lunch. I attended the Sunday coffee as promised and met a dozen or so neighbors, mostly retirees like myself, though there were a few younger residents as well. They were friendly without being intrusive, welcoming without overwhelming. I found myself exchanging phone numbers with two women close to my age, who invited me to join their weekly bridge game. "We're not very good," admitted Barbara, a retired librarian with short silver hair. "But we have fun and the wine is excellent." "I haven't played in years," I warned them. "Perfect," said Jana, Barbara's partner. "You'll fit right in with our level of mediocrity." I laughed, surprised by how easy it felt to make these new connections. At my old house, I had known the neighbors, of course, but our interactions have been limited to casual waves and occasional conversations about lawn care or holiday decorations. Here, there seemed to be a genuine interest in building community. On the 15th of September, my phone rang at 6:23 a.m. It was Richard. "Mom," he said, his voice breathless with excitement and anxiety. "Melissa's in labor. We're at the hospital. It's happening." My first grandchild was coming into the world. Despite everything that had happened, despite the still unresolved tension between Richard and me, I felt a surge of emotion. "Do you want me to come?" I asked, already reaching for my robe. "Yes," he said without hesitation. "Please." "Melissa asked for you specifically." That surprised me. Melissa and I had never been particularly close, and after everything that had happened, I had assumed she blamed me for the upheaval in their lives. "I'll be there as soon as I can," I promised. Catherine drove me to the hospital, dropping me at the entrance to the maternity ward. "Call me when you're ready to leave," she said. No matter what time. I found Richard in the waiting room, pacing nervously. He looked exhausted already, his hair disheveled, his shirt wrinkled. "Mom," he said when he saw me, relief evident in his voice. "Thank you for coming." "Of course," I replied. "How is she?" 6 centimeters. They say it could be a few more hours. He ran a hand through his hair. "She's been amazing, so strong. But she's in a lot of pain." "First babies often take their time," I said, remembering Richard's birth, 22 hours of labor before he finally arrived, red-faced and screaming. "Where are her parents?" "Driving in from Toledo. They should be here by noon." He hesitated. "She asked if you would sit with her for a while." She wants to talk to you." I nodded, slightly apprehensive about what Melissa might want to say at such a vulnerable moment. Richard led me to her room, where she lay propped up on pillows, and in her arm and monitor strapped to her belly. "Eleanor," she said when she saw me, her face lighting up with unexpected warmth. "You came, of course," I said, moving to her bedside. "How are you feeling?" "Like I'm being torn in half," she admitted with a grimace. "But they say that's normal." Richard excused himself to get coffee. Leaving us alone, Melissa reached for my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "I wanted to tell you something," she said, her eyes locked on mine. "Before the baby comes, I need you to know that I'm sorry for everything that happened, for taking your room, your house, your things, for not standing up to Richard when he was making all those decisions without your consent. I hadn't expected this, not here, not now, not from Melissa, who had always seemed to follow Richard's lead without question. I was scared," she continued, "about the baby, about money, about the future. And when Richard started talking about moving into your house, about using your accounts, it seemed like a solution to all our problems. I didn't let myself think about what it meant for you." A contraction interrupted her, and she squeezed my hand tightly, her face contorting in pain. I talked her through it, coaching her breathing until the wave passed. "You don't have to do this now," I told her when she could speak again. "We can talk later." She shook her head. "No. I need to say it. Before she's born, I want her to come into a world where we've at least tried to make things right." She took a deep breath. "I was wrong, Eleanor, we both were. And I am so sorry." There was a raw honesty in her voice that I couldn't dismiss. This wasn't a calculated attempt to get back into my good graces or secure financial support. This was a woman about to become a mother herself, recognizing the gravity of what had been done. "Thank you for saying that," I said finally. "It means a lot." Richard returned with coffee, and we settled into an unexpected rhythm, Melissa and I talking between contractions, Richard and I taking turns supporting her through them. The hours passed in a blur of shared purpose, our complicated history temporarily set aside in service of something more immediate and profound. At 3:42 p.m. Sophia Eleanor Pearson entered the world, 7 pounds 9 ounces, with a full head of dark hair and a cry that filled the delivery room. Richard cut the cord, his hands shaking, tears streaming down his face. The nurse cleaned and swaddled the baby, then placed her in Melissa's arms. "Mom," Richard said, his voice choked with emotion. "Would you like to hold your granddaughter?" Melissa nodded, holding the tiny bundle out to me. I took her carefully, cradling her against my chest, studying her perfect face, her miniature fingers, the rise and fall of her breath. "Hello, Sophia," I whispered. "I'm your grandmother." Something shifted in that moment, not a dramatic reconciliation or a magical erasing of past hurts, but a subtle realignment of possibilities. This child, innocent of all that had come before, offered a new beginning. Not a replacement for what had been broken, but a reason to build something new from the pieces. Later, as I sat in a chair by the window, still holding Sophia while Melissa napped, Richard perched on the arm of my chair. "Thank you for being here," he said quietly. "It means everything. She's beautiful," I replied, tracing Sophia's cheek with my finger. "Mom, I know things aren't fixed between us. I know what I did can't be undone or forgotten. But I want her to know you, to have you in her life." I looked up at him, this son who had hurt me so deeply, who had also given me this extraordinary gift. "I want that too," I said honestly, but on new terms, with clear boundaries, with respect for who I am now, not who you thought I was becoming. He nodded solemnly. "I understand. I'll earn back your trust, however long it takes." I wasn't sure that was possible. Trust, once shattered, is difficult to restore completely. But looking down at Sophia's sleeping face, I knew I was willing to try, not for Richard's sake, or even for my own, but for this tiny person who deserved to know her grandmother. That night, back in my condo, I sat on the patio under the stars, mentally replaying the day's events: the birth of my granddaughter, Melissa's unexpected apology, Richard's tentative steps toward reconciliation. It wasn't the ending I had imagined when I first discovered my bedroom transformed into a nursery. It wasn't a neat resolution with clear winners and losers. It was messier, more complicated, filled with both closure and new beginnings. I had reclaimed my life, my space, my autonomy, my dignity. I had faced betrayal and emerged stronger, clearer about my worth and my boundaries. I had lost a house but gained a home that truly reflected who I was now. And somehow, in the midst of all that reclaiming, I had found room for the possibility of forgiveness, not the easy kind that pretends harm never happened, but the harder, truer kind that acknowledges the wound while choosing to move forward anyway. As I sat in the quiet of my new home, listening to the fountain in the garden, I realized that the true victory wasn't in punishing Richard or erasing what had happened. It was in refusing to be erased myself and standing firm in my own story. Even as I made space for new chapters to unfold, Richard had been wrong about so many things. But his greatest mistake was in those words he'd spoken when I discovered the nursery. "I thought you wouldn't come back." I had come back, not just from the stroke, not just from the hospital, but from the attempt to write me out of my own life. I had returned, reclaimed, and rebuilt, not the same as before, but perhaps stronger for having been broken. And that, in the end, was the most powerful response I could offer to those who had underestimated me. Not anger, not vengeance, but the quiet, determined presence of a woman who refused to disappear.